The Pilgrim Life is brought to you by the StarQuest Podcast Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate.
Welcome to Pilgrim Life Podcasts, where we find the sacred in everyday life. My name is Deborah, and I'm joined with my co-hostess, Sandy, co-hostess with the mostest. Say hi, Sandy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pilgrim Life.
And we are starting a new season and a new name. We actually started as Pilgrim Podcast about in 2010. Sandy and I started together, and we focused mostly on the Camino de Santiago and preparing yourself for this pilgrimage. But we have found that we like to branch out. So we have renamed our podcast to Pilgrim Life because we have so much more to tell you other than the Camino de Santiago, which we'll talk about today too, because I'm about to go on the Camino as we record this, right? But we're going to tell you a little bit more about who we are as people. Again, my name is Deborah,
and Sandy,
and that's Sandy. And I am going to tell you that when we recorded iPilgrim Podcast, and it's still up on iTunes if you want to listen to back episodes. I was living in Florida at the time and working for a very large rodent and also teaching. And then I moved back to my home state of Nebraska, which is where I live now. And I work for the University of Nebraska. And I am going to be going on the Camino de Santiago as we're recording this. I'm going in 4 days. But I'm taking a class full of students with me. So I'll explain more about that. I do work for a social science department within the university, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about the Camino. And so Sandy can introduce herself because I feel like I'm talking too much. So go ahead, Sandy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandy, and I work at a chemical dependency center, a drug rehab center. I have been involved in pilgrimages longer than I can remember. I undertook my first pilgrimage as an adult at the age of 38, going to the Camino de Santiago back when the internet, they looked like pinball machines and they were cyber cafes and cell phones were not really available. So it was a little bit more difficult back then. But my pilgrimage history goes as far back as being a small child, when every year my parents and grandparents used to take us to a very small town where they had the feast of St. Francis Xavier. We've been going every single year, and at 55, I can tell you that I have been to that town probably every single year of my life.
We'll have to talk about that at some point because the rituals and the spot itself is fascinating. I know we've talked about it in the past on iPilgrim, but we'll have to talk about it in the future with Pilgrim Life because it's a fascinating pilgrimage. Should we talk about how we met? Because it's a cute pilgrimage related story.
Absolutely,
we have a meet cute. It's a
absolutely.
Meet cute. Go ahead. I'll let you start since you're the one that you tell it so well.
Well, when I first started listening to SQPN, I was listening to the show, The Daily Breakfast with Father Roderick. And Father Roderick started talking about this American pilgrim that was, on the Camino. At the time, I was actually living in Spain. I was living in Logroño. And the Camino went right in front of my apartment. And it was like, oh my God, it's like, I have to go on and I have to meet this woman. I have to find her. And lo and behold, I did.
Well, the funny thing is that I had walked the entire Camino and gone home. And I think you listened to the show where I called from Spain, but I was already home in my jammies in Florida by the time
Mm-hmm.
You ran out to the Camino to try to find me. I'd already finished the Camino, and that was in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you decided to email me, and we talked about this because I always wanted to start a podcast, thanks to SQPN. I was kind of there when Father Roderick started Daily Breakfast, and back then it was Rosary Army and St. Cast and all sorts of great SQPN podcasts, and I wanted my own show, and I didn't know what I was going to do a show on. And then Jimmy, that's our nickname. If you've listened to iPilgrim before, you know that our BFF is St. James, the person who is the guy, this superstar in charge of the Camino de Santiago. It's named after him. There we go. And so Jimmy has become basically our upper management for this pilgrimage experience. He's, we report to him and he reports to the big man. So this is how we roll with the Camino de Santiago and then all pilgrimages. And we'll talk about that in future episodes, like different saints and different pilgrimages. And it's all very exciting to all of us.
Mm-hmm. And it's also kind of interesting to note that some of the other pilgrimages that we have undertaken, pardon my French, the Chemin de Santoire up in Canada, it also started with a dream. And I actually called Deb and I'm like, who's Brother Andre? And that's how we ended up. So it's kind of interesting that we kind of get guided to different pilgrimage routes in one way or another. It's either a story or we do research or, piques our interest. But perhaps the biggest gift that we have gotten from going on pilgrimages is how we're able to live the pilgrimage experience in our daily life.
It's true. It's funny when you said watch my French. I'm like, oh no, Sandy, this is a Catholic podcast, and she means literally, pardon my French, because her French is hysterical.
Well, yeah, it's they told me that I'm saying something, but it's definitely not French.
It's probably, yes, because you speak Spanish fluently.
Mm-hmm.
English is your second language, if you couldn't tell by the accent. But when she's working on it, she's actually learning French now, right?
Yes, I am. I got Rosetta Stone for our next pilgrimage because we've been talking about undertaking a rather large endeavor by going up to Chartres in France.
Yes, sure.
And that will be in the future, but it's something that we're working towards.
Right, because there's, I guess this is a good time to talk about what the Camino de Santiago is. If you're new to this podcast, if you're new to the idea of Pilgrim Life, or you'd never heard of the Camino de Santiago. So St. James, Jimmy, he's one of the sons of thunder, one of the fishers of men that Jesus called to drop their nets and come follow him, and he did. And at the Pentecost, apparently St. James was given the ability to speak, whatever they spoke in the Iberian Peninsula, and that's where he ended up, was in Spain, modern day Spain. And that's actually after he came back to Rome, before he was the first apostle to die. He told his disciples that he would want to be buried in Spain, in modern day Spain. That's where his heart was. So he has a fascinating pilgrimage story, and if you know anything about St. James, it's he built one of the first Marian shrines. Did you know this?
Yeah, I did.
It's pretty cool because the first Marian shrine is in Zaragoza, Spain. I only know pieces of this, but it's basically Mary bilocated while she was still alive, and James was trying to get people to turn to Jesus Christ, and Mary appeared to him in Spain and says, here's a little doll of me and build me a shrine, and that's what happened. So Zaragoza is still in Spain and still a Marian shrine.
And it's an unbelievable basilica. I have been there, and the devotion to Our Lady, it's beyond belief. One of the stories, one of the anecdotes about our Nuestra Señora del Pilar in Jimmy, our buddy Jimmy, is that Jimmy was a little bit despondent over the fact that he was not really getting much success in his work. And she said, it will be after your passing that you will be, continuing to, convert people, and bring them into Jesus. And my Lord, since that time, it's been millions and millions and millions of people, and not just Catholics, not just Christians. My experience on the Camino, people that came in either being complete atheists or agnostics or Buddhists, and I've met them from, all over the place. Something happens, you get transformed, and you develop this incredible relationship with God, with life, with His creation, with humanity in general, really.
Yeah. In fact, that's part of, I'm leading this trip for the University of Nebraska, and we're studying pilgrimage in general and using the Camino, because the Camino in recent years has, because of movies and books, has, the numbers walking to Santiago is somewhere right now around 30,000 people a month during the months of like March through October. And in July, it's about 50,000 on the Camino. So we're talking, hundreds of thousands of people walking to Santiago every year. So Jimmy's still the fisher of men and women. Mm-hmm. Of all walks. But the thing that has happened to the Camino, and it's also something we study in sociology, which is it's become a secular pilgrimage too. So half of the people that are walking now are not necessarily going for religious reasons. It's very interesting.
It really is. But, in one way, the Camino will always change you. There will be one person, one albergue, one event, one experience that stays with you for the rest of your life.
Right. Well, it's someday I think we're going to do a larger expanded show about some of the aspects of pilgrimage in general. And I just wanted to keep it simple for this first episode, because there's so much I could talk about with the different pieces that go into pilgrimage. And I wanted to, I think Sandy and I want to do like a brief resume about our pilgrimages that we have done. So this will be my third time on the Camino de Santiago. I've done the whole one from Saint Jean Pied de Port, which is usually traditionally the starting place for the Camino Frances. And it starts in France, obviously, and over the Pyrenees into Spain and across northern Spain. And it takes what'd you say, 40 days to walk it? Maybe a little less, depends on your pace.
Well, I work in a relaxed manner, so I get there when I get there.
Yeah, and some people get there when they get there. And some people, Americans are terrible about this. I mean, I hate to stereotype Americans, but Americans are like, it's kind of like a quest to do it quickly, or a quest to do it a little faster than everybody else. It's almost like a race, and then they get there and they're like, why am I racing? But, and some people like speed up their pace and some people slow it down, but it's just an unusual condition, I guess. There's a lot of guidebooks with stages, there are traditional stages, like you walk to this town on this day, or but there are people who just walk until they get tired and find the first place to stumble into, and that's where they stay. And that could be 5 kilometers, or it could be 15, or it could be 50. Who knows? Mm-hmm. I don't think it would be 50. That'd be a lot. That'd be terrible.
No. No. I know. I stop whenever I stop.
Father Roderick did a 40K one day, and I was like, don't do it. And then he's like, that was really silly. I shouldn't have done that. I'm like, I was shouting, like, don't do it. That's a lot. 40K will give you blisters and ruin you.
Well,
for some people.
Not to mention the fact that, a 40K day leaves you just like mushed for the next 2 or 3 days.
Right? Yeah, I don't recommend that at all. But people do their own pace, and they learn from their experiences what they can handle and what they can't handle. And some people can do 40K without breaking a sweat. I know just a little side story. Like the last time I walked the Camino de Santiago in 2011, and I started in Pamplona that time, and it was in October. And I met up with a young man from Australia and a young man from Ireland. And the guy from Australia, one morning I was walking, I'd started early, and he slept in, and he woke up and he ran like the entire way. He ran like 15K to the next albergue and crawled into a bunk and took a nap. And I'm like, wow, no. So I saw him later in the afternoon after he was well rested. So people do that. That's what he wanted to do. So that's what he did.
Yeah. And, we've been very lucky because, we have been on pilgrimages, together, before. Oh, some of them, overseas, like outside of the country, and others inside of the country. Not too long ago, Deb got to, visit me here in Arizona, and we took a drive down to Tucson and then just further down towards the border. And we went to San Xavier del Bac, which they call the church the White Dove of the Desert. This church was actually built by the Jesuits when they were first coming in, from like southern Mexico and moving up. And the retablos, the wooden carvings of the altar and on the church are absolutely extraordinary. It's probably one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen. And then we've been to, again, pardon my French, the Chemin de Santoire. We started up in Montreal, and we walked past Quebec and ended up in Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré, which again was an incredible, incredible pilgrimage. And, on the secular side of Pilgrim Life, I have taken Dev on a short pilgrimage to my hometown of Tijuana, Mexico, to my favorite taco stand.
Oh, those were the best tacos, street tacos.
And I mean,
great.
For me, that's a pilgrimage. It's just like peasant food. I know the people that prepare them, and I go there, and it's just like it's such joy. And it is, it's secular, yes, but the joy that you get from that, and that you just sit there and eat, and you're going, thank you, God, for this incredible meal. That's finding, God and his creation and sacred and the little things in life.
Yeah, and I just recently went on a pilgrimage, which we'll talk about in another episode, to Chimayo, New Mexico for their Easter pilgrimage, and it's amazing. But we'll get to that later. But and I've also made my own. Another pilgrimage I did last year was Pilsen, Kansas. The pilgrimage to Father Capon, and that'll be another episode. I've also made my own pilgrimage in my small town in Nebraska because I'm from a small area, and then we have a Marian shrine there. And I did on the Feast of Our Lady of Fatima. For 2 years, I had 30 people walking with me for 16 miles across the fields in Nebraska and to this Marian shrine, and it was great both times.
Yeah, and then on my end, I have been to the Chapel of the Miraculous Medal up in Paris. I have been to Lourdes a number of times, which again will be another episode. I have also been to the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. I've been to Aspetia over Loyola at the home of San Ignatius, or Saint Iggy, another one of my homies, and also to Xavier, the birthplace of Saint Francis Xavier. So we've been on a few. and and like I said, it's whenever we happen to travel or we go into a small town, and even within our own cities, we go out and we go to a church that we've never been, or a park, that has like a
labyrinth,
that we've never been, and we bring in the experience of simplicity and and just the gift of presence, of just being there, just being in that present moment. And that is all part of living the pilgrim life.
Yeah, I agree. It's part of what they call luminality, which a very sociological term, which is that whole process of taking your identity and kind of chucking it and just being in the moment and being who God wants you to be, or being, finding who God wants you to be. And it's a great process to go through. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't wait to share some of the different, pilgrimages that we've undertaken, the things that we have seen, the prayers that, have been like passed on to us, by other people, prayers that we did not know, stories of the saints, little prayers that, we have created in just a moment of, wow.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting that we know that we're doing this and that we get to share it with our many listeners and friends out there.
I'm so excited. Like I said, we're recording this and I'm actually getting ready to go on my third Camino in just a couple days. And I'm actually doing about 3 pilgrimages within one. This is so fun. Can I tell you about my trip? I'm so excited.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because this is how I roll. So I'm taking 15 students plus one other instructor from the University of Nebraska, and we are doing about 300 kilometers of the Camino. We're starting in Leon, which is about a third of the way from Santiago, and we're doing about 2.5 weeks of walking. I didn't want to do the whole thing with 15 people because it seems like that would be a lot to look out for in a month, to get 15 people across Spain without anything happening. So we're trying it this way first. And we're gonna start in Madrid. We're meeting in Madrid. And you know what feast day is on May 15th? Anybody? Bueller. It is the feast day of Saint Isidore, which is one of the patrons of Spain.
Oh, that's right.
Isidore the farmer from Seville. And they have a 4-day blowout, like fiesta in Madrid. So it's like fireworks and hundreds of little celebrations spread out throughout the city, including free music and dancing and parades. And there's even a shrine in Madrid where you can go drink holy water. And, I think they'll have the relics of St. Isidore out, so you can go out and find those and touch them. And I'm so super excited. So that's one of the things I'm doing. And then another thing I'm doing is I'm going to Avila. I'm going to see what I call Big T, Teresa of Avila, one of the doctors of the church. And it is actually her Jubilee year. They're doing all sorts of walking pilgrimages to Avila for her. And I don't have time to do them. They have stamps and they have, credentials, and they have readings, and they have stops along the way just for her. And it's super excited. I have been wanting to go see her convent for years. I know Sandy's been there herself. Yeah. I have not. This will be brand new for me. So that's even before I get to walk the Camino, and then I get to walk the Camino.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's like Deborah's tour of saints, of Spanish saints.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's quite exciting that you're going to be, up there at this particular time. Hopefully, there will be a time, when we can talk about the connection between Teresa of Avila, the Big T, and Saint Iggy, Ignatius of Loyola, because at the time, both of them were extremely influential. And for those that are looking to deepen their spiritual life, I highly recommend that you look into the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. Better done with a spiritual director, but there's a number of books where you can actually do them at home. And there's also, Interior Castle by Teresa of Avila. Probably, it's a must read for every Catholic.
I have a confession, and this is my terrible confession. So I have Interior Castle, and I have every Lent, I'm like, I'm going to read it. I'm totally going to read this whole book. And I get through about, the 6th chapter before I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'm still struggling with the Interior Castle because Big T, that woman was amazing. In the 15th century, this woman was like starting convents and her own order and writing books and manuscripts and, setting the world on fire in her part of Spain. And, and for a woman to do that, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. So, but, her view of the soul and the view of her relationship with Jesus, it's like everything that I've ever wanted to aspire to. And I'm like, wow. I don't know if that's ever going to happen for me, but it's really kind of interesting. So in the future, what we'd like to do is we'd like to do a couple shows coming up. One of them was going to be on Chimayo, because Sandy and I have both been to Chimayo, which is in New Mexico. So we're going to start with some American pilgrimages first, and we'll talk about Pilsen, Kansas. And since that's an up and coming one. Actually, it'll probably be the weekend of June, the first weekend in June. So I'd like to start with that too. And we were going to talk also about, probably by the time I get back from the Camino, I'll want to do another show on the Camino, because that's just, that's who we are, right? We roll like that. Mm-hmm. And California missions, and we'll want to talk about Canada, and there's so many places we can talk about, so many different types of pilgrimages.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that there's a book that we will, discuss, with our listeners later on, that it was just one of those flukes that, it was just on a bookshelf and we picked up, and there's secret places that you can go all over the United States. And every single state has 1 or 2 or 3 little places that you can go out and visit. And you can just have like a day out in the country and turn it into a pilgrimage.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff we're going to visit in the future. And we hope that, this first show, we're kind of getting back into our groove. It's been a long time since we've podcasted. I think our last show we did, Sandy, was like 2 years ago. Probably. And it was, I don't even know if you were around for the interview I did with the guy in Hawaii who did the way of St. Damien of Molokai. And I interviewed him because he set out this whole 8-day path, which you can't walk right now because there's a volcano exploding in the middle of it. True. Because, it connected all 8 churches that St. Damien of Molokai, or St. Damien, he wasn't in Molokai at that point. He was in charge of these 8 churches on the Big Island. And so they like span the length of the island. And you start on the north side and you walk south, and it takes like 8 days to do it, but you have to go through Volcano National Park. And right now, Kilauea is exploding. So I imagine you can't get to the last church on the list, which was something by the sea, like some saint by the sea. They're a very technical term. But then he was shipped off to Molokai, where he did the work with the lepers, and that's where he died. So that's that. If you want to check that out, that's still on iPilgrim Podcast. I believe that there's an episode about that, and you can find that on iTunes. Right now, we don't have a web page for that anymore. It was always my goal to rebuild it, and it just hasn't happened. But now we have a new one through SQPN, and hopefully this will be the first of many new shows.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right. So we're going to wish you a buen camino.
And don't forget, find and feel the sacred in everyday life.